If you're a Christian, you might think that Hollywood would be the last place to go to set up ministry, behind those secure studio gates and confines of movie making. Well, we caught up with two guys that felt otherwise. In fact, are making a big impact on the industry. This is Connections with Rich and Bobby. Hi, I'm Rich Homeris.
And I'm Bobby Hamlin. Those two Hollywood guys are Phil Cooke, president of Cooke Media Group, and Jonathan Bock, the founder and the head of Grace Hill Media. They've also co-authored the book entitled The Way Back, How Christians Blew Our Credibility and How We Get It Back.
For those who might not be familiar with the film industry, can you share a little bit about some of your work and some of the projects that you've worked on that might be familiar to those that are listening in?
Well, I can start. Cooke Media Group is a production company here in Los Angeles, and we do a couple things. We produce original programs and movies, films, documentaries, but we also come alongside and work with some of the largest ministries and churches in the country. Our passion is really helping leaders share their message more effectively in this distracted culture we live in today. So we've worked with Salvation Army, the Museum of the Bible, the new museum that's open in Washington, D.C. We work with some very, very large churches across the country. So it's interesting. I believe that we live in a media-driven culture, and if we don't speak that language, we're never going to make much of an impact.
He's also shockingly good looking.
Absolutely.
Don't forget that part
I
of it.
noticed that.
Yes,
right away.
it's true. And then my company, Grace Hill Media, has been in business almost 20 years, and we primarily market film and television to people who go to church. So studios and networks hire us to do kind of a niche marketing to pastors and religious radio stations and things like that. And so over time, like different projects we've worked on are like the Narnia movies and the Lord of the Rings series, Bruce Almighty, a bunch of different movies like that. And then on the television side, the History Channel Bible series, and then CNN had a lovely series called Finding Jesus. So we've done a bunch of different projects.
So anyway, you've reached the Christian community and also the mainstream market. And doing that is practically like winning the lottery. I mean, there are so many people in the business who are trying to make it. And so can you each just summarize a little bit about what your journey was? How did you get to this place, and when did the Lord enter into that journey?
Well, I've never known what it was like not to be a Christian. My dad was a pastor in North Carolina growing up, and I've been behind the scenes at church my whole life. And back in high school, I used to take my dad's Super 8 film camera. That tells you how old I am. And we made movies. I had a bunch of friends, and we made Army movies and war movies and space movies and mafia movies. And I took them to college thinking maybe I'll find guys in college that would like to make movies with me. And when I was, literally the day I got there, I was unpacking and a couple of the films fell out of my suitcase. A student across the hall saw it, introduced himself, and said he was taking a film class, and he could show me how to edit those things. I didn't even know you could edit film. That's how ignorant I was. And he took me to the film department. We worked on my film one night, and the professor was there. And on his way out, when he was leaving, he said, I've been watching you guys work on that film, and that's better than the work most of my students are doing. Could I show that film in my class tomorrow? And I said, well, sure, I can sit on the back row.
Oh, darn.
I know. I sat on the back row. He showed my little movie. And after it was over, and it was nothing great, believe me, but after it was over, people talked. They started talking about it. And this idea hit me. I don't know if it was a revelation or what, but this idea hit me that if I can do something with a camera that makes people talk like this is what I'm supposed to do with my life. So that day, I literally changed my major, and I've never looked back. We've been involved in this now since all those decades ago, and it's been an interesting journey. So, yeah, it hit me hard. I changed my major, and here we are.
And Christianity has always been a part of that?
Always been a part of that. From day one. I mean, we've done a lot of secular projects, just like Jonathan has. We've done Super Bowl commercials and PBS specials and all kind of things like that. But generally what drives us is trying to share the message of the gospel out there to people. And whether that's through a secular project or a Christian project, we'll do either. But generally we kind of tilt towards helping the church, helping ministries, helping Christian leaders tell their story more effectively in the media. So that's kind of how we roll.
Right.
And like Phil, I've gone to church my entire life. My dad was a composer and arranger and music publisher named Fred Bock, who did a ton of church stuff. He was also the choir director at Hollywood Presbyterian Church with Lloyd Ogilvie for 20-something years. I originally was a sitcom writer, and I ended up breaking up with my writing partner, and I took a job in the Warner Brothers publicity department. And while I was there, I didn't really have any interest in marketing or publicity or anything, but I said to the people who were working there at the company, I said, I think people who go to church would really like these movies. One of them was the Tom Hanks movie, The Green Mile. I think people who go to church would love that movie. And they said, great idea. Let's find a company that does that. And we looked everywhere, and there was nobody doing it. So my wife said to me, well, why don't you do it? And so I gave them a proposal, and they said, in the absence of anybody else doing this in the world, we'll hire you to do it. And that's I was only about 3 weeks smarter than the rest of them, but that worked out. And from my own faith, it really got serious for me when I read this book by A.W. Tozer called The Pursuit of God, which upended me pretty good, as it has been doing for people since about 1947. But it really impacted me, and that's ultimately what got really serious about God.
Now, Hollywood.
Yep.
Isn't that a tough place for Christians to work? I mean, it almost seems like when you see these award shows,
Right.
when somebody comes to speak and accept their award, somebody is going to mock something about Christianity. Does Hollywood hate Christians?
I don't think so. John, you have your opinion, but I think Hollywood is just ignorant of all things Christian. I think like the highest levels of any industry, go to the high levels of the attorney business or the high levels of the insurance business, and you'll find most of the people probably aren't Christians simply because they don't know anything about it. And I think part of our response is I would like to see Christians view Hollywood not as the enemy, but as a mission field. We go to third world countries and we send missionaries all over the world, but we never think about sending missionaries to Hollywood. And so instead of getting upset and mad every time they do a show we don't like, let's start to pray for Hollywood. I think that would probably have the biggest impact of anything of all.
Yeah, and I would say this, which is those of us who are in Hollywood, we are apparently the only people who are tempted by money and sex and power and glory in the world. And so, it's really hard for us. Fortunately, none of you have to deal with that at all.
An interesting look into the mirror. You're listening to Connections with Rich and Bobby.
And we're meeting up with fellow believers, having you hear from them as they share interesting thoughts, their journeys, and even challenges to reflect on as we visit together with them and with you.
If you'd like to contact us to share your comments, we'd love to hear from you. Our email address is simply connect2richandbobby@gmail.com. That's connect2, the number 2, Rich and Bobby, Bobby spelled with an I, @gmail.com.
Also, you can connect with us on social media by friending us on Facebook, post on Instagram, or tweet us on Twitter. Or you can listen to our program on Pandora.
Now, back to our talk with Hollywood executives Phil Cooke and Jonathan Bock.
What have been some of your biggest challenges as Christians to work in this medium?
Well, I think, obviously you get projects presented to you that you're not comfortable with. So the way I deal with it is everybody knows what I believe, and it's actually not that weird being a Christian in Hollywood. There are people here that hug rocks and worship trees and all kind of weird stuff. So, it's not that weird being a Christian, but I think the thing is to be genuine and authentic. And I always tell people that come to Hollywood, young filmmakers, that lead with your talent, not with your faith. Every year we get people coming out who will say, God's called me to Hollywood to change things. And they'll go meet with producers or studio executives and say, I'm here to change Hollywood and God's going to lead me. And they get laughed off the lot. But if you're a great writer or a producer or an actor or marketing executive, you get their attention with your talent, they'll listen to anything you have to say.
The hardest moments, most complicated moments for me personally are when studios or networks call me with a project and say, we know we're going to have a problem with the Christian community on this project. Can you advise us?
That sounds like a wonderful open door. You must be excited when they say it.
It is. It's a challenge, right? Because I don't necessarily want to see those things go well for them. However, I want to help them understand so that this doesn't happen in the future. So I kind of see my role change into being like a defense lawyer, that I'm here to give you good counsel, and we'll let the chips fall where they may when they fall.
I think the key thing to remember is it's better to have someone like Jonathan in that room than not in that room. And I think of Joseph. Joseph was the number 2 man in Egypt, and he saw things that he detested. As a Jewish man, he saw things he couldn't stand, but he understood the influence he had by being in that role, and he didn't walk away from it. He didn't get upset at it. He didn't criticize. He just did what he felt like God was calling him to do. So him being there made a difference.
Now, when Hollywood looks at the numbers, the success of faith-based films, do they come to you guys to say, how can we make more money?
Yep.
In a word.
Yeah, well, I mean, hopefully they're calling us on the front end of that. And so when they're seeing the success, it's because we're already working with them on these projects. And it has really developed from when I got started. It was very highly unusual to any of them to invite faith-based media to come see movies early or interview their stars. And there was a lot of discomfort initially with that. But, fast forward here 20 years, and it's a real business. And there's multiple studios that are actively making faith-based content. And so it's a very exciting time. One of the things that Phil and I have been friends a long time, and Christians in Hollywood were a very small, secretive group. We all had these dreams of like, oh, wouldn't it be great if we could make this movie or that kind of movie, and now all that stuff has happened. And one of the things that I think we realized is that our dreams were too small, that we had only been dreaming, so far up, and that God's plan was way bigger than that.
Yes. I remember when the movie came out, The Passion of the Christ, and it made a lot of money. So many people went to see it that suddenly they were interested in what else can we do?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand Hollywood as a business that's trying to catch lightning in a bottle twice. Let's say a World War II movie comes out and makes big dollars. Well, that next week, studios are saying, get me a World War II movie, right? So the key to pitching them ideas is to be in that stream of things that they're already looking for. That's what they're looking for predominantly.
You've been listening to Connections with Rich and Bobby. Phil Cooke and Jonathan Bock have been our guests. Phil is the president of Cooke Media Group, and Jonathan is the founder and head of Grace Hill Media. They've also co-authored a book entitled The Way Back: How Christians Blew Our Credibility and How We Get It Back.
Also, we'd love to connect with you. If you'd like to share your comments, you may email us at connect2richandbobby@gmail.com. Again, that's connect, 2, Rich and Bobby, BOBBI, @gmail.com.
Then, if you have a smart speaker, you can also listen to us there by simply saying, Alexa, Siri, or Hey Google, play the podcast Connections with Rich and Bobby. Also, you can listen to our program on Pandora.
Then finally, as we mentioned, you can connect with us on social media, on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. So please take a moment to let us know about you, and also what you think of this program.
This is Connections, connecting with one another as Romans 1 verse 12 says, that we may be mutually encouraged by each other's faith, both yours and mine. So thank you for listening, and remember, tell others and spread the word, God's word.
And don't forget to join us next time on Connections with Rich and Bobby.